Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, April 16th, 2026, and today we're talking about keeping the greenhouse warm in the spring lo-fi-ly, feeding everyone you want to, a biostimulant made of seaweed, and what's so bad about those synthetic fertilizers, the loaded show today. So let's do it. Makes me think of baked potatoes, loaded. Now I want a baked potato. All right, lovely Thursday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well and feeling well and all of those good things. I hope everyone enjoyed the interview with Lucio yesterday about the chinampas as well. That was a lot of fun, and Lucio is a wealth of knowledge, so huge shouts to him for coming on. As promised, I did get the drone up in the air yesterday, and strangely, it flew really well. The exposure on the camera, however, would not chill. I tried every little camera trick I could think of, but just could not get that exposure to come down. Again, that thing is quite elderly as far as drones go, at about 10 or 11 years old. But those of you watching here can see a little overhead of the farm headed into late April. Nothing super exciting there, but the cover crops are happy. That's fun. There's stuff in the ground. A few beds are ready to be planted. A few tarps are about ready to come off. We're cruising. Even did a few deliveries yesterday. Got a few things started in the greenhouse. Feeling good. Season is just kind of rolling now. How about you all? How are things in your neck of the woods? Let us know, or better yet, send us a 20-second farm video clip to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. Love seeing those. All right, so Thursdays. Thursdays are the day where we take Patreon questions, but I've been wanting to sort of change the dynamic of this day up a little bit to make it more engaging for you all, encourage you all to think about how you would answer these questions, giving it more of a group council vibe, our group therapy session. Get it? I don't need to explain that. So we will still take a few Patreon questions, but I want you all to feel more empowered to think about the questions and what you all would add in the comments section. We've got a lot of smart growers who follow this channel, and I love to hear what direction you all would take these questions in. We're going to go with, I think, 5 questions today, again, to catch up on the Patreon questions after my voiceless march. So today's first question comes to us from Papa John Misty, who asks, quote, "Hey Jesse, I have a question regarding propagation house heating. At our farm, we have a decently sized greenhouse, 24 by 48, for starting our plants, but it is currently unheated. We've looked at installing a heater, but it's a few years away budget-wise. My question is, do you think a head may," which I think is an autocorrect accident that means maybe space heater or heater, "and remay would be enough protection for starting plants in late February, early March. For reference, we are in zone 7B. Thanks so much," end quote. Thanks. And since it had an alarm emoji, I told John at the time, for you there, yes. What I use is, in a similar climate, we're a little bit colder than you all, but similar, is some heating cables that have like an internal thermostat and kick on around freezing, and then some row cover over top of that. That will get me incredibly far and protect most things down to around 25 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like -4 degrees Celsius. In those situations where it gets below that -4 Celsius, 25 degrees Fahrenheit range, I have to add a small space heater to blow under the remay or the row cover. Or if I can't do that, then for me, the more sensitive stuff needs to come inside for the night. You could add water barrels in the spring, but, and I've said this before, if they have water in them over the winter, I find they kind of keep the place cooler in the spring until around mid to late March or early April, if there has been a lot of sunlight. I haven't tested that against the exact same greenhouse. It just feels that way inside the greenhouse. It just feels colder. I'm not a fan of using composting to heat a greenhouse passively either, just for the fume risks, both to you and to the plants. A rocket heater or something like that can work, but with the right design and execution. But obviously, something that like a heater like that you have to get up and feed. You don't want to be out there in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures having to stoke the fire, and again, a few hours later to restock it. Anyway, those are my general thoughts on that question. We'll let the comments section do the rest. Thanks, John. Next question we have comes to us from Blair Aiken, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I know microgreens may not be a big part of your current farm setup, but I'd love to hear if you have any ideas on how to use and or compost the spent soil mix and extra root matter in microgreen trays left after harvesting. A while ago, I heard that Steadfast Farm was trying out a method to spread leftover microgreen soil directly on their beds, which sounded cool. I've wondered about dumping microgreen trays onto a patch of ground in the summer and covering it with clear plastic to solarize it. We don't currently have a compost system and are considering different options to start one. Our urban farm doesn't consistently produce a lot of quote unquote green material for composting. So I'm wondering if the leftover root and stem material on the microgreen soil plus any nitrogen amendment in the soil blend we're using, that would be feather meal, I think, would produce enough nitrogenous material to activate the microbes without adding any other ingredients to our compost pile. Hopefully that all makes sense, and I'd love to hear as many thoughts as you have on how to use microgreen soil. Thank you so much for all the information and research you make accessible and fun to listen to, end quote. All right, thanks Blair. You are correct that we no longer do so much in the way of microgreens. Occasionally we'll do a random one for an order or something, but generally speaking, we don't do a lot. We just don't have a great setup for it. You kind of need like a good, consistent temperature, light, all that stuff. And we do everything in the greenhouse, which is not where we get those consistent temperatures or sunlight or any of those other things. But also a lot of that just has to do with the markets that we're in now, and that we couldn't just, find a way to make selling them wholesale make a ton of sense financially with our setup. But we did grow a ton of microgreens for a long time when we were doing the farmers market, because it was an easy thing for people to just throw into their orders at the farmers market. And so, yeah, we had a lot of spent microgreen trays at the time. Often they indeed just went into the compost pile, if I'm being honest. That was the easiest place to repurpose the soil mix and roots, etc. We just never did enough trays to evenly place them across a whole bed. But we definitely did that a few times as well. We'd put them directly on the bed after they were done, and then maybe we lightly harrow them into the surface or something, because then you're just adding a bunch of that, organic matter, which no problems there. In general, I liked adding them to the compost pile, or even as long as the entire microgreen crop was dead, mixing it into finished compost was kind of my preference, to be honest. You need a fair amount of nitrogen to get it composting, because the spent soil mix itself is pretty carbonaceous and often doesn't compost, like heat up that well. In fact, I could see a scenario where a reliance on too many trays in a compost pile would actually slow down the thermophilic stage. But let's say you have a large compost pile and you just use the trays as a sort of cap. You put all the spent microgreen mix right over top of that pile and then slowly, mix them in as it heats up or whatever. That could work. Just be mindful of not letting the trays cool off the pile too much before it's done, doing its cooking thing. So that's kind of it. Pretty simple, but maybe others will have something additional to add. Otherwise, I think we will take a quick break, and then we will keep up the consult live on the air several hours before it goes live, because we have to edit it. Mike has to edit it. Anyway, BRB.
All right, guys, so this is the first till I've ever done, front yard. This is amazing. This stuff is just tilled right off the bat. There's so much organic matter, and I know I've grown corn up here before, so it is very rich soil. The video doesn't do the color of the soil justice.
Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything: custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. All right, back to the show.
A quick and loving reminder that if you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Kaylin Hammett, who asks, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I want to hear all the ways other farmers are addressing food insecurity in their communities, not just by donating already spoiling veg or accepting SNAP at the farmer's market, but real, impactful, dignified, accessible things that we can do to support the most vulnerable members of our community while still breaking even. Some other farmers in my area are having success with sliding scale CSA shares or through continued contracts with nonprofits that have secured enough local funding to offset the end of LFPA, that's the Local Food Purchase Assistant Cooperative Agreement Program. Ahead of this season, I want to implement as many of these practices as I can on my farm to serve all of our community rather than just those that can afford premium priced fancy vegetables, and encourage others to do the same. Thanks and happy growing, end quote. Okay, great question here. And I'll spend this whole segment on just this one question. Having your food be accessible is one of the biggest challenges for growers who, with already tight margins, can struggle to feed everyone who might be interested in their food without assistance. A lot of those like really, really high scale growers, the people that are making absurd amounts of money per acre, they're selling in really high end markets. So that's not exactly like trickling down to everybody. And because most farms are not nonprofits, access to the grants that still do exist and larger donations are somewhat limited. In fact, in some ways, farms starting their own nonprofits, possibly with other farms for funding and tax purposes, isn't the worst place to start if you really want to make this a viable option. That way, you could use that nonprofit for fundraising, and then you have the nonprofit reimburse you for, say, a pay-what-you-can model or sliding scale CSA that does not recoup its costs. You could likewise get creative with other growers in the area if someone can designate/donate an area of land that they aren't currently using for, say, an acre of potatoes or something with some calories to it to be donated to food banks. Maybe everyone can collect donations to cover the seed and fertilizer costs, then have just one big community planting, then one big cultivating and hilling, then one big harvesting party for the sole purpose of using the land, equipment, and collective skills to feed a bunch of people for several months. That's a lot of work, but the unfortunate reality of farming is that most of us do not have the money to support a farm that gives its product away at any meaningful level. You can't lose money or you won't feed anyone because you'll be out of business. So you have to think about all the work and capital that goes into it and how to cover those costs. I also want to say, though, that SNAP, WIC, Double Dollars, all of these things, these are programs that do help get healthy food to people who may not be able to otherwise afford it in a fair and at least vaguely humanizing way. Food pantries too, donating food on its way out is not ideal, obviously, but donating excessive harvests or food that goes unsold at least gives it a chance to be consumed. There are also gleaning communities and organizations that can help take the work off the shoulders for that, even coming to the farm and harvesting food that would otherwise get turned into the soil. Focusing more on these programs might also be the easiest and most effective answer because then you're not trying to reinvent any sort of wheel here. This issue of food access is near and dear to me, though, as someone who grew up with a poor single mom who desperately wanted to feed us well, and food stamps helped tremendously in that. Those programs need support, and they need for the many, many money holders that we have in this country to simply be paying their taxes like the rest of us instead of rallying against so-called entitlements, so that the less fortunate children of this world can grow up to farm, to create habitat for wildlife, protect the air and water we ingest, and have weird daily podcasts about soccer as a bonus. Anyway, how have you all found ways to support your local communities and still keep your business going? Let us know. Otherwise, it is break time, and then we'll do 2 more questions, and then the world. Be right back.
Hi, my name is Barbara, and I'm a backyard gardener in Lexington, Kentucky. I want to share with you guys my secondary way of starting seeds, which is called the floating tray. Fill the tray with very fine seed starting mix, put the seeds in, and let it float in some kind of container. And the seeds more or less take care of themselves. I started this tray about 10 days ago.
Today's episode is brought to you by Good Agriculture. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping and tax filing, so there is no scrambling at tax time. They keep your books clean and up to date and show you where your farm's finances stand. If you're behind, they'll get you caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit rimmel.com today to get growing. All right, back to the show. All right, we've got 2 more questions, starting with this one from Chloe, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse, just sharing something cool and looking for your thoughts. I live in Bas-Saint-Laurent in northeastern Quebec, and one of my good friends works as a seaweed harvester, which is as cool as you'd imagine. There was a documentary on the company he works for, which makes biostimulants out of a very specific kind of stress-resistant seaweed called Ascophyllum. We call it goémon. There was a documentary on their work, and among other things, it suggested that this Ascophyllum-based biostimulants
biostimulant could be interesting in foliar applications to increase resilience against environmental stressors, and that it could be an excellent aphid repellent on pepper plants. It's supposed to be organic approved and looks interesting. Have you heard about this? I thought it was interesting, end quote. All right, thanks. And I haven't heard about this specific one in particular, but there are so many seaweed-based biostimulants right now. It's kind of a little bit hard to keep up with it. In general, I don't have a problem with them. I don't think they are going to harm anyone's plants or soils, as far as I can tell, if used in moderation. And you may certainly see some positive crop responses. There is some research to back that up in terms of ascophyllum and its use in foliar sprays for increasing plant growth, pathogen interactions, etc., specifically in tomatoes. So I don't think it would hurt to try it on a small sample size and see what you think. One thing I will say is I watched the video, and the opening scene is the farmer using a hand scythe and cutting right at his feet, which freaked me out a little bit. So cut away from yourselves, my loves. But yes, seaweed, so long as it's sustainably farmed, is loaded with micronutrients, hence why so many growers use kelp. And being a plant, it can be harvested sustainably. Is it a necessary amendment? Maybe not really, but if I lived near a sea, I would probably find a way of incorporating some seaweed, and I do like kelp in the first years of the garden. Now, there are areas where seaweed harvesting is depleting this incredibly important ecological resource that provides habitat for all sorts of organisms and cleans the air and the water, which itself would make a great topic for future episodes, so duly noted. The group in this video does seem like they're conscious of the regrowth, but not everyone is. So if I were buying a product like that, I would just make sure to inquire about the harvesting practices. So yeah, anyway, lots of benefits to seaweed, but not without its complications, of course. All right. Our last question of the day comes to us from Tom Welsh, who writes, quote, "Hello, Jesse. Would you please discuss the drawbacks of using synthetic fertilizers in no-till gardening, particularly a garden transitioning the no-till method and lacking sufficient organic nutrient availability? The land-grant universities seem to readily promote the use of synthetic fertilizers. Do the plants respond differently to organic versus synthetic?" End quote. Okay, great question here. It comes up occasionally. So in general, the main problem with synthetic fertilizers is that they, one, leach into the groundwater, which causes all sorts of environmental issues. Two, the synthetic chemicals do the hard work for the plant, so it doesn't have to, make relationships with the microbial communities, which often reduces the flavor and potential, like health benefits of the crop, and also reduces its root spread, so you're not building as much soil. So like if you're having nutrient availability now, it's not going to benefit you in the future. It's basically just keeping it the same. And then three, they can lead to reduced microbial diversity in the soil. It tends to favor bacteria. So even if the resulting chemicals are roughly the same as the microbes would produce to some extent, the plants do respond differently to them in the sense that they interact differently with the soil life and the soil. So it's not really getting you anywhere. It's not getting you to a new point. Maybe if you're using it with like cover crops or something, but in general, it's not going to make the nutrients any more available next year. The roots won't go as deep. The microbial populations won't grow. Those synthetic fertilizers are just not going to move you forward. A simple compost application will offer a lot more in terms of getting you closer to crop and soil health success. Moreover, there are all the negative effects on the environment in the creation of those chemicals, not just in their use. The creation of those chemicals, from the pollution around the factories to overmining of certain nutrients to energy usage and synthesizing of nitrogen, etc. There's just a lot there. All of that obviously needs to be taken into account. So yeah, not saying organic farming is perfect, but the benefits of these synthetic fertilizers does not outweigh their true costs. And the reason land-grant universities and such like them is they're easy. They're easy to recommend. It's really easy to say, put on X amount of X fertilizer, then advising people on how to make and use compost, for example. Anyway, I hope that does answer the question. Listeners and viewers, feel free to put your thoughts about any and all of this in the comment section. And otherwise, I think that is it for this Thursday, Therapies Day. I'm just going to keep trying it. We'll see how it goes. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations, they're tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and or subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That is a super easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, if you have a business and you're like, I want to show that I love this show, even if it's redundant, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Farmer Michelle for all her work, to Willie Breeding for the theme music, and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear so I can get a drink of tea. And heard about it all. Pick up a hat or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of April that we are over halfway through, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to Bridget, Shouts to Bridget, our new earthworm. All right, so the story of Pop-Tart continues, thanks to Bridget. So, as you will recall, our feline heroine, Pop-Tart, has left the house where she chooses to live because some humans broke in and finally left the dang door open for her. And anyway, she saunters down the road to one of her other houses, and but the things are just chaotic in the streets, like very chaotic. The humans are acting completely ridiculous. There's people everywhere. There's some that are just lying on the ground lifeless. Pop-Tart thinks about how it's like that stupid holiday where everybody dresses up and asks for candy, but like way worse. And she gets to the next house where there's no food. And then she goes to her other house and the same thing. There's nobody's leaving out any food. How could this be? What is going on? Are the humans broken? How dare they? And then she sees one of her familiar humans and decides to just go pester it. But it's doing something peculiar. That is for tomorrow on Pop-Tart Lets Her Humans Have It. All right, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow for Friday for Feedback Friday. That'll be fun.